Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Secret Sunday session. Today I'm joined by Michele Kambolis, who is a doctor in mind body medicine. Welcome, Michele. Thank you for jumping on the podcast today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
And you're all the way from Canada, which is phenomenal that we can really start these
That's right.
conversations in these spaces from across the world. And it's something that I feel very privileged to be able to do. And as I mentioned, to have you on today and discuss all things mind body medicine, which I think is, I'm not sure about Canada, but here in Australia is a very hot topic around health, wellness, the mind, the body, and that relationship. And I'd love to dive in deep with you today on that. But first off, for those people that are not aware of who you are and what you do, who is Michele and what does she do with herself?
Yeah. So, like many women, I have all kinds of roles. And I'm a mother, first of all. I've got two adult children. Well, not children anymore, but they are to me. And so I'm a mother. I am an author. I am a therapist. I teach meditation, and so much of what I find myself doing is really creating ways for our communities to heal, to grow, to awaken, to face some of the difficulties that are unfolding in a way where we're able to be wise and steady and come together as best we can. A lot of my focus is just really listening deeply to where I'm called to be.
I love that. And it's phenomenal the work that you're doing for the community, really, in this space. And a lot of people are, and sometimes it is motivated by your own story or your own personal journey. But for you, what led you down this path to pursue helping people in this space really build that connection between their mind and their body?
Well, it's interesting. As a therapist, I'd been working in this field for, gosh, about 15 years. And I found that the practices, the traditional approaches, just really weren't fitting the bill, really. They weren't meeting the needs of the people that I was working with. And a lot of my clients wanted to explore holistic means for healing, and were tired of being on their medications and wanted something beyond talk therapy and even cognitive behavioral therapy, which is very effective, but has limitations. And so I started to explore. And I think when we really listen intuitively, the answers just come. And I woke up one night at about 1 in the morning, and I just had this really deep, overwhelming sense that there was something more for me to do, something different than the ways that I was practicing. And so I hopped online, and I remembered coming across some kind of an article or post that this woman, another therapist, had shared. And she was talking about a program in mind body medicine. It was unlike anything else that I'd ever heard about. And I delayed going back to do my doctoral for a long time because there wasn't really anything that was pulling me back. And all of the programs were really kind of clinical in their approach. But I woke up at 1 in the morning, and I just dove into the research and discovered the program that she was talking about. And 10 days later, I was doing my PhD in mind body medicine in Seattle. And so that was a 6 year process, and very rigorous academically. And it was everything that I had hoped for in learning about holistic, integrative ways to help ourselves heal. And that ran anywhere from integrative nutrition, so really using food as a source of healing, to movement and integrating nature, so turning to nature and immersing ourselves in nature as a way to support our nervous system and natural capacity to heal, and and then psychospiritual. Um, there are all kinds of studies to show that when we root into some form of faith, it can be deeply healing. And so, the work was really about coming back home to our natural intelligence and our natural capacity to self-heal.
I love that. Coming back home to your natural intelligence. What a great statement. And I think it is very relevant. I know here in Australia, we talk a lot about, moving more to holistic approaches in terms of health and well-being. But do you think that there is a place for medical intervention? Like we can't just entirely rely on holistic approaches?
Well, there's this sort of beautiful dance between the two. And I think, we have the danger of being really dualistic in our thinking, where it's either or, and it all has its place. So I take a stepladder approach. So if I'm seeing a client and they're struggling with anxiety or depression or some other symptoms, then we start with an evidence-based holistic approach to healing. And and then, if these changes aren't enough and the client is still struggling and still suffering, not able to work or meet the needs of their family or their parenting life or just themselves in terms of a sufficient feeling of well-being. We're not going for perfection here. Life is always changing, and discomfort is part of the experience. But if they're not sufficiently well and feeling stable within themselves, then we look to medication or, some kind of a psychotropic approach to addressing symptoms.
It is interesting how we do have a mindset where it's either one or the other. Um, in your practice, when you're seeing, people coming with anxiety and depression, are you seeing statistics, cases, people increasing and they becoming also younger in age?
Certain areas of difficulty we're certainly seeing the numbers increase, and it's really no surprise. Our food has changed significantly over the past 30 years, and so with glyphosates and a lack of integrity to the quality of our food, that's having implications in terms of our mind body system. And particularly out of COVID as well, we're seeing the long term impact, and people are still recovering from that experience. And
In what
so,
way?
well, if we look at our youth who were in school masked or having very little social contact, that was a key developmental time in their life where they missed the level of connection and skill building and confidence socially. And many now are still feeling very isolated and disconnected. So our elderly were impacted. We were all impacted, and so and there's grief and loss. So some of us lost loved ones, or maybe facing the long-term health implications of having had COVID. So it's very layered. And there's a part of us that wants to just move on, forget COVID even happened because it was so painful.
Mm.
And at the same time, it still requires that we look at the impact because we're still in many ways struggling from what we've experienced collectively.
How do you think we become aware or that we know that we are struggling with something that's happened in the past?
Well, you just said the key word, and that is aware. When we become aware, when we pause and we reflect and we listen to our inner world, that awareness guides us to self-knowing. So I think we're moving so quickly and doing so much, and our brain is processing more information than it ever has before in history. And so some kind of practice of reflection is critical to really understanding and coming home to our needs.
How do we prioritize that in a world that is constantly telling us that we need to do more, work more, hustle more, be our own business owner, be the best mom, be the best sister, or, the last person to leave the office? How are we supposed to prioritize that time so that we can actually slow down, reflect, and honor ourselves?
It's such a good question, and it's such a radical decision when you look at the culture that we find ourselves in, where we're encouraged to go faster, we're encouraged to achieve, where doing is the priority over being.
Mm.
And what are we but human beings? So um, it means um, really getting, it involves for many people getting fed up enough to choose something different, getting really brave and clear with boundaries, and asking, what am I willing to give up in order to reclaim my well-being? So that might mean giving up something that you enjoy in the evening so that you can go to bed earlier and get enough sleep, and maybe wake up a little bit earlier so that you can sit down and listen to a recorded meditation, or learn how to practice on your own. Or maybe it's making a cup of tea in the morning and journaling first thing. Some kind of reflective practice that resonates for you, so that you can actually start to listen to your own voice in this noise of so many other voices.
How important is doing this work daily for people? Because I know here in Australia, the culture is thrown around quite a bit to, be more self-aware and have self-care practices. And it's almost to the point where it's commercialized. And I think sometimes people then don't understand, well, what actually is the benefit of this? If everyone is talking about it and saying how great it is, yet we're not seeing the measurable, attainable results as such, people don't want to invest in it. They don't see a need to do it. So in your experience, what are the benefits from doing this? And do you think we're at a stage where we're talking about it too much, where it's becoming almost, as I mentioned, commercialized?
It's become incredibly commercialized. And I mean, the benefit of that is there's so much available for people to now learn these practices. And 25 years ago, when I first started talking about meditation, for example, no one really understood what meditation is. And then the Dalai Lama came to North America and started working with researchers and asked them to investigate in a very objective scientific way what the impact might be of meditation, and to study the monks and to make their own decision about it. Well, we now have over 10,000 studies investigating the benefits of meditation. And while we know it's not the answer to everything, there are tremendous benefits from decreasing symptoms of anxiety, of depression, increasing fulfillment and a sense of meaning in life. For couples, couples who meditate have greater compassion, empathy. It increases altruism, creativity, focus, and attention, which is something that most people are struggling with. So, we're talking about just this one practice, and there are many other practices that we can talk about and explore, but just this one practice alone changes your brain and rewires your brain for a greater sense of calm, focused, awakened presence.
Wow.
You sleep better, you perform better, you learn better. So it grows certain regions of the brain, four in particular. So if you look at people who meditate, they have greater cortical thickening in various regions. And the one that I want to talk about in particular is the mid-prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for thinking and processing and analyzing. So, and regulating emotion. Not hard to find a benefit in there that may apply to you.
Is there one practice of meditation that is the answer? I think a lot of people go into meditation and think, well, I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do. And there are many different types of meditations that you can pursue in your discovery or experimenting with meditation. But what do you see as a meditation practice that has been successful or helpful for people?
Well, this is a really good question because meditation has so many different variations and forms. And it's like looking at sports and calling soccer and field hockey and swimming sports. Well, no, they're all very, very different. It really depends on the result that you want. If you want to heal your heart from being in a struggle with somebody, you might focus on a forgiveness meditation. So, but as a practice, just starting mindfulness of body breath is a foundational practice in your heart and mind to the life that's right here in a way where we become more available to ourselves and the people in our lives.
I think that's so important when we talk about, I know even the work that we do working with young people and in the community, in how much connection is important, but not just being surrounded by people, but being truly present in that moment with people. And we lack it. A lot of us don't know or understand how to do that with the rise of digitalization and not knowing how to communicate probably as effectively, especially from younger generations. It's becoming more of a struggle of how we connect with one another. And I think it's really interesting that meditation can almost come in and provide not a solution, but an easeful way to learn how to not only connect with the people around you, but with yourself. And I think that that's such a important aspect of connection is you cannot give connection if you're not connected with your whole person well-being as well.
Well, this is something that I hear about so often, and we're really all on a path of self-discovery and getting to know ourselves well. Um, and and if we're not able to connect with ourselves, if we're abandoning ourselves, then how do we hold any level of hope in being deeply connected with the people that we love and matter most to us? These practices are critically important in fostering that level of connection. The other thing that meditation and self-reflective practices do, they develop a different relationship with your mind. And our minds are so busy analyzing, judging, criticizing, separating ourselves from ourselves and each other that and we have a really strong negativity bias. So that's part of evolution, that we will assess something negatively as part of the survival response. And it takes a lot of practice and commitment to change that relationship to something friendlier, to something more compassionate, where we see that the mind is really only one part of our experience, that we are not our mind, or we're the observer of that thinking mind. And so while the mind is an amazing thing, I mean, we have the capacity to innovate and create. And, if we look at literature and the extraordinary pieces of art and these magnificent um, buildings and architecture and our ability to heal through medicine, our minds are extraordinary. But that aspect that makes us so extraordinary as humans also creates an enormous amount of suffering.
Do you think it takes a particular type of person then to move past the suffering, or we all have that in us, to that innate culture almost as humanity to sort of acknowledge the suffering, but then find a way to move past it? We just, as you mentioned, have to learn to train ourselves.
We all have the capacity to minimize our suffering. Part of being in a human body is that we are going to suffer. It's a fact. But we have the capacity to transcend that suffering by like really changing our perspective and how we're seeing the suffering as it's unfolding. So, look, we're all going to face illness. We're going to face the loss of relationships. We're going to face the loss of loved ones. There are experiences that are incredibly painful that we cannot avoid. But what we can do is root in a wisdom and knowing that the pain and the discomfort is temporary. That is life is ever changing. And whatever tragedy we might be facing will become a memory eventually. Mm. That we have the capacity to soothe ourselves and lean into each other's care and get through the difficulties that we face.
How do we find perspective when we're stuck in that suffering and in that loophole? Because, I mean, I've worked with a lot of people I know, even in sometimes my own experiences, when you're stuck in that hole and you can't see a way out. And it just, the brain, as you said, just keeps latching onto the negativity, and you pick up in it in your everyday life. It's kind of like when people mention they have that bad day and it's like, oh, one thing after another. And there could be great things in that day, but you pick up on the bad. Your mind hones in and focuses on that. When you're in that moment and when you're in this loop, how do you find perspective? How do you get yourself to a point where you can confidently find perspective and change?
Well, the truth of it is, perspective doesn't come right away. Perspective comes in time. When we're really in the thick of it, the best thing that we can do is be compassionate with ourselves, to just come back to the breath, to do whatever practices are soothing and kind. That might mean just slowing down. It might mean going for a walk in the woods. It might be calling up a friend to say, I'm really struggling right now. And it requires that we're just really honest and allow ourselves to feel the emotions, to not bypass the emotions. And then you can reassure yourself that whatever this is will be part of my growth, be part of my learning, part of my development, part of my wisdom, right? And it requires a level of self-trust. I trust that what I'm experiencing right now will lead to greater knowing.
Why do you think a lot of us don't have self-trust? We really have a disconnect between our minds and our bodies.
Well, at a very young age, we're taught to abandon our own needs and opinions because we're part of a family system.
Mm.
And in order to manage in that family system, we want to we want to please brother, we want to please sister, mom and dad, and then you go to school and then you want to please teacher. And so it's part of our way as a child of surviving because we need to be connected and bonded to the people in our lives. And so it takes some time to unwind that. Hopefully, we grow up in a family system where we're also encouraged to have a voice and given reasonable choices so that we can express ourselves. But even under that condition, we suppress our needs in order to be liked, in order to be accepted. And then as we get a little older, we realize, wow, I've gotten so far away from myself. I don't even really know what I want or need. And then
Mm.
it's a process of coming back.
It's very fascinating because, I mean, you even think about or look at that transition of, childhood to early adolescence. And that's when generally sometimes we then see young people experience anxiety or depression as they're coming out and trying to figure out who they are whilst unlearning everything and realizing they haven't been in alignment with themselves for such a long period. So really, I really, I think, sympathize for young people in today's environment because not only are they navigating that on a more conditional level, but also with the introduction of social media and digitalization that pulls them away again from their true self. It's really hard to navigate that. And I know with a little bit of like research into the work that you do, you talk about this generation stress. And I'd love to hear your thoughts around what that is for you and why you think we have this generation stress.
Yeah. So I've got the book right here. So
Love it.
Generation Stressed was a book that I wrote about 8 years ago because I was seeing such an increase in children and youth walking through my clinic door with severe levels of anxiety. So not only were the rates increasing, but the severity of symptoms were increasing. And there's a lot of pressure. You're describing it well. There's an incredible amount of pressure to know your direction from a very, very age. So young people are making decisions about their professional path in grades 10, 11, 12. Enormous amount of stress. Because how do you know your mid-prefrontal cortex hasn't really fully developed until at least the age of 25? And so I encourage young people to just explore and not expect to have it all figured out. How can you have it all figured out? Most of the adults that I know don't have it all figured out. So, can you make this an exploration and something that is really just playful? And know that whatever you decide now is not written in stone, that life is going to shift and change constantly. People change career paths at least 5 times in a lifetime. So this is just your first decision, and you can choose at any point. And so that's one aspect. The other difficulty is just growing up, breathing the air of technology, where we're branding ourselves and seeing all of the best. It's like a highlight reel of a person's existence. So it's less likely that we're seeing the struggle and the suffering. And so when we're constantly exposed to everyone's highlight reel, of course, the mind is going to compare. And so when you're down or when you're anxious or when you're having a difficult time, like the assumption is that you're alone, when in reality, everyone else is having a shared experience of that, at least maybe not at that particular time, but maybe it's next week or next month.
It is really fascinating how we, on a global scale, are able to enter everyone's front door and see how their life plays out. And while we can't stop the advancement of our society and the advancement of technology, it's part of progression and it's part of growth. But because I think we're progressing at such a fast pace, like when we look at it in, the last century, so much has developed so quickly that, as you mentioned earlier, how are we supposed to keep up with this? How is even a mind that is fully developed supposed to keep up with this? And as you said, we're putting this so much pressure on these young people in order to know what they want to do, to know the direction, because we're also seeing in the media that we're living in an environment that is uncertain and that you can't take risks and you can't experiment in life because you have debts to pay and you have a family to feed. And all of this, I think subconsciously as well, then becomes quite aware of a young person. And whether they take that in consciously or subconsciously, of course, we're going to then see statistics rise in anxiety and depression or any other sort of coping mechanism as well that may be quite toxic. How do we communicate to young people when, as we mentioned, their brains are not fully developed? How do we change the messaging to help them pursue exploration and pursue experimentation rather than, taking in all these pressures? We're quite clear on how we can share that message to people of a mature age, of an age that I guess has more emotional maturity. But for a young person, how are we supposed to share that message so that it does sink in?
Well, I think we need to create safe space for young people. And that means, um, first of all, as adults doing the work ourselves so that we're more present and aware, putting down our phones, having conversations, increasing intimacy, and really making ourselves more available and in that safe space and really being able to show up, then it increases the likelihood that the children and youth in our lives have a place to be able to um, just safely talk about the struggles that they're having. So that's number one. And creating environments where we can come together in purpose. So where there's really a shared purpose and a meaning to our time together. So, instead of this sort of parallel activity of we're watching a movie or we're doing something where we're engaging technology, um, can we instead meet each other where we're at a little bit more? So maybe there's something that needs to be addressed in the community and a certain group that needs help. And here in Vancouver, we have the downtown east side. And, I've collected a group of teens that are it's like so compassionate and all of which are facing their own struggles. But when we go to the downtown east side and we offer our help and we bring supplies or we do, some kind of a collection for donation, it gives perspective and each of them kind of like walk away with what they're meant to learn through that experience. And so, I think if we can just find ways to come together where it's deeply meaningful, the conversations just naturally unfold. The answer is in the connection.
Mm. Always comes back to connection. It's something that I think is so paramount in, our human species and even like the animal species, if we go even further, is we're all in need of that connection and we're all striving for it. And sometimes it really determines whether or not we're in, as we mentioned, like that suffering where we feel like we're not connected to anyone, or we're in a safe space where we feel like we are connected to people and we may be on that thriving path. So it's very, very fascinating, and I'm so grateful to have you on today to share all of your insights in this space. And it's absolutely incredible the work that you were doing in this space. And I thank you from not only us here in Australia, but obviously your community over there as well. The work that you're doing there absolutely needs to be more people doing it, but it really sounds like you're really paving the way, and I'm so grateful that you are.
I'm glad for the conversation and appreciate you having me on.
Thank you. And now, before we let you off the hook, we do have our hindsight question. So it's a little segment that I have created at the end of the podcast because often I get so invested in the stories of the interviewees that come on. And then afterwards, I think, oh, I should have asked that question. So I developed my amazing hindsight questions. But our first question for you is, who would you spend your free time with and why?
I would love to spend some time with Ani Pema Chodron. And so she is a Buddhist nun who has done so much to really bring the wisdom of Buddhism to the West. And I've met her on a few occasions, which has really impacted me, that her quality of loving presence. And there are certain human beings, and maybe you know some of them or have met
Mm,
like this, that embody so seamlessly this authentic, loving attention.
mm,
And I would love to spend more time with her and learn and just immerse myself in that emotional vibration. Maybe, like we, we just want a little for ourselves, right? And um,
selfishly, we just want to take it. Yeah.
right, she's a very wise being and such a testament to the outcomes of the practice. I mean, she's human, right? I mean, I'm sure that's not the case all the time, but we all, even the wisest Buddhist nuns and monks get angry and frustrated and reactive. Um, but yeah, she carries a level of wisdom that I would love to spend a little bit more time with.
I'm interested just quickly to know, you mentioned bring like Buddhism to like Western culture. How was that being received?
Well, incredibly. I mean, I think that so many, people are now looking for wisdom practices in order to um, really awaken ourselves. We're faced with such difficulty, and at some level, we all know that there's this beating drum that's getting louder and louder, and unless we change our habits, our patterning, our ways of being, with each other and this planet, unless we change this rapidly, unless we awaken to the conditions um, that we face, then the suffering will increase. And so Buddhism becomes a wisdom practice of, um, soothing ourselves, of healing the division, of increasing compassion, and ultimately like awakening to the truth that we find ourselves in. And and so it's just one answer, but for some people, it's an incredibly supportive practice.
Mm.
It's something that I discovered when I was 16. I had lost my first boyfriend had died in a car accident, and I was deep in grief. And my refuge was the public library. And so I found myself there just getting lost in the books, in the literature. And I came across a book called The Hermit, and it introduced me to Buddhism. And and it just like awakened this way of looking at life that was very different than everything that I had been taught. And I really loved the idea that our our true nature is goodness. I mean, we have light and we have shadow, but goodness, that human goodness is something that we can all discover within ourselves, that there's a Buddha in our heart, where the quality of Buddha within each of us. And then became very fascinated with meditation. And then, fast forward, gosh, 20 years later, let's see, I was 15, 25, 35. No, 30 years later, I was teaching a meditation class, which I have for many years, every Monday night online. And for those who might be interested, we start again on January 20th. And it's an 8-week program called Monday Meditation. So I was teaching and I decided that I wanted to share this book called The Hermit. And so, but I'd lost it a couple of years before. I'd carried it with me my entire life and then lost it. And in trying to find another copy, learned more about the author. And I discovered that this author, this revered Lama that taught me so much and really shaped the direction of my life, wasn't really a Lama at all. He was a plumber from Alberta. And there was all this
Plot twist.
controversy around him. And even the Dalai Lama had gone on the record to say, while we Tibetans appreciate the support for Buddhism, the author is not a Tibetan Lama. He is
Llama.
very unrelated. So,
Wow.
which was such a pearl of wisdom, right? Because the people that we learn from can come in these, forms where, maybe they're a leader or an author or a spiritual teacher, but a plumber from Alberta or someone who's sweeping the streets can teach us equally
Mm,
and
amazing.
inherently wise.
You just have to be open to it. But what a plot
Mhm.
twist, man. Oh, that is so interesting, though. I find that definitely, as you said, we can learn something from everyone. Everyone's got a story. Everyone gains wisdom. It's just, I guess, what you take away in the point in time in your life, what you want to take away from it as well. So incredible, incredible. All right, second question. Oh, interesting. What is your favorite feeling and why? So feeling as in emotion.
Favorite feeling. So much of my practice is about not having favorites.
Mm,
So when we're in a state of craving, then we're welcoming in suffering. Because if we don't have what it is that we most want, then we're going to feel disappointed or a sense of lack.
mm,
And also, when we're in discomfort and we're judging that discomfort and trying to get away from it rather than openly accepting it, we just exacerbate our suffering.
mm,
So, okay, I'm going to answer. I mean, humor, joy would be my favorite.
mm.
Well, and what about that state where you're just so open and aligned with nature and feel that incredible mystery of life? I don't know
The
what that feeling would
curiosity.
be. Yeah, yeah, maybe that's what it is. It's magic. Like there's a there's a feeling that we don't yet have a word to that is just about magic and mystery. But at the same time, I try not to get kind of stuck on seeking it,
Mm,
um, because emotion is just ever changing, it's ever moving. And so when we, judge it as good, bad, or otherwise, then that's where it gets sticky, you
mm.
know.
Well, I'm not
Such a
supposed
good
to have favorite answers, but that's a pretty good answer. So, thank you so much for jumping on today, Michelle. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to
You're
you.
welcome.
And where can people find you? Where can they purchase your book or follow you and your journey?
You can find me at michelekambolis.com. On Instagram, I'm at Dr. Michele Kambolis. And yeah, those are the two main places that you can find me. I mean, I'm on all platforms, but um, reach out anytime. It's me answering, not a bot and
Thank
not a team
goodness.
member. It's me directly. So I'm happy to hear from you and to help in any way and answer any questions that you might have on your path and your journey.
Incredible. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon in Canada. Um,
Ew.
hopefully you enjoy, I believe it's winter over there or it's colder.
Well, it's winter, although Vancouver is very mild. So we haven't had snow yet. You have to go up to the mountains for that. But we have had a lot of rain. But you know, the sun pops out and we all, you know, uh, rush to get the sunlight on our face. And other than that, we're in front of our light boxes because it does get really dark in Vancouver in the winter, but very green and beautiful. So
I love that.
um,
Unlike
yeah.
me over here, that's roasting like a tomato because I'm that burnt at the moment. But no, thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you as well, everyone else out there, for joining us for another Secret Sunday session. We hope you guys enjoyed this session. And as we mentioned, you can check Michele out on all of her platforms that we'll put out on the show notes. But thank you so much, and we'll catch you guys all next time.